Okay, yeah.
Okay, big us everyone around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just get straight to it. I said I was going to get you something very special for Christmas. On behalf of Shihan Billy and Shihan Johnny Ross, can we please also introduce them, as well as Hanshi Tino Ceberano? A big us to all three of you.
Thanks, Sensei Pat, and really thank you very much.
Could I have a cup of coffee, please?
For this opportunity. I just want to say thank you very much to Shihan John Ross and Hanshi Tino Ceberano for the time to come on to this Kyokushin Shuffle. Not just started off,
but I think
it started off as an idea.
Oh no, I put it in the microwave.
It started off as an idea of just documenting a lot of Kyokushin things, but it's evolved. As things evolve, the martial arts has evolved, the stories have evolved, the history has evolved. And this was a dream that, and just from some discussions that Sensei Pat and I had in the early stages, was to document the history of Kyokushin, or the history of martial arts for the generations to come. And in discussions of that, you know, especially in Australia, the history of Kyokushin or martial arts was all styles together. We were in the 60s, 70s and 80s. We were all affiliated. We were working well together, and the comradeship and the friendship we had with the KIA groups and the FACO groups and all those tournaments. So this is a really good opportunity to document the history and to really acknowledge Goju and the relationships of Goju and Kyokushin in Australia, both in the dojo and out of dojo. And I think in the next hour we'll have some good memories that we've shared basically overseas and in together. So again, thank you both very much for appreciating to come on to this and to spend that time. So over to you, Johnny, for a couple of words.
Well, thanks guys for having me part of this. Thank you. And I've just got to get my bearings. I'm not used to this. First time I've ever done this. So, so I just got to learn to relax. I'm not good in front when I see myself in the camera, guys.
You can see Hanshi is such an experienced person. He's so relaxed. He's got his coffee.
He's got it all under control, mate. He's got his coffee, he's got everything.
Yeah, look at that. He's so laid back, sir.
Well, here we have it.
Order a cup.
Well, Hanshi, how are you? Thank you for joining us on the Kyokushin Shuffle.
Aloha. Yeah, well, okay. With regards to a good start, I'd like to just firstly commend the very, item that we've started talking about, in the very beginning of how, coming together and what it was from the very onset, especially how it was here in Australia as it got started in the 60s, etc. But, like getting back to the earlier days, especially as I would say at this particular point in time, and everyone would very well put to like somewhat of a, an agreement that Hawaii played a very, very big part by way of, Shihan Babilo and the likes of how the Goju, and even, of course, through Sosai, our great Sosai Oyama, how it was that Hawaii took somewhat of an exposure of the beginning of Kyokushin outside of Japan. And I was there in 1960, even sitting one man next to Sosai Oyama through what we had as a function after the first All Hawaii Karate Championship. And I mean, that was All Hawaii Karate Championship with all styles. You see, the one thing that I would also like to put forward, not only for the historical reason, etc., but how it was in Hawaii, that the likes of Babilo Shihan, Masao Shiro Shihan, the likes of Miyagi, I mentioned all the top names of the old people from Hawaii who are now even gone, right? They were the bastion of what was martial art as like into the Western country being created as such, where, this is something of a wording that we could very well put in our Hawaiian way of the aloha. The task of what it was of not only bringing people together, but the formula, the fellowship, the bond. Whether we had, different dojos, etc., we could always get together. We could always get together in training, right? In partying and having to exchange whatever we've had. This goes back from the likes of the World War II era, and then the post-war days, etc. And of course, I got even involved in it from the 50s, from the mid 50s, and finally even having a touch of 3 months of training with Kyokushin Kai under, like Bobby Lo Shihan back in the late 50s, mid 50s. And, I go back with pride thinking that when I came to Australia, I had something that I was able to offer. And when I did, it took like something else. If everyone from the days of the 60s and 70s, especially for Melbourne, they would realize that we got together from the guys from Geelong, from Melbourne, everywhere, in training in parks, down the beach, and we've had barbecues and parties and whatever. And whenever we even got into the competitions, like from state to national, etc., we were victorians. We came together, going by bus, stopping in the same hotel, etc., enjoying ourselves, and we've always had that cohesion, that sort of, like what we would really put to it as what happens to be of the special. I put it as in like a martial arts way. We are a special breed of people, but we've got to command just that mode of our very code of the martial arts: respect, courtesy, and the discipline, one with the other. So this is a kickstart for this particular future. We see not so much, there's a Greek word, by the way, I might just mention this because I'm sure this is, relatively important. The word politios means politics, and politics in definition is lies. How many bloody politics and politicians got together, and what was it that conflicted so much with banging heads together? And that is the cause of what confusion is all about. Yes. I really put it there now, guys, that in view of our development progressively over the years, we've undertaken something which is very important. And I mean proudly to say the words that I will use as like an affirmation, right? I choose to live by choice, not by chance. Make changes, not excuses, right? It's just something plain, simple, but this is life. In our martial art, we are taught the very word of which was, brings upon our elements of continuation in the art, right? As do, D-O. In the Chinese word, it's Tao, T-A-O. Now, philosophically, this happens to be something of a self-imposed thing that we're on about. How we are really commanding ourselves into that very precept of how we've been taught, the mind, the body, and that soul or the inner spirit, or what we even consider as staying power. This happens to be, of course, just as a topic. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of training, because this has happened to be something very enjoyable and most rewarding. I say most rewarding because we know Johnny and Johnny Shihan and Bill Shihan, they know very well what we've gone through in the likes of even traveling to Hawaii, experiencing what we've had in Hawaii, and then, of course, enjoying what it was here in Australia.
Well,
We
there
must
you go.
continue on. But as I say, in the continuance of our training, our art, we've got to always think about this as necessary. Retaining traditional values. Our retaining of traditional values will enhance our particular training. When I say traditional values, by the way, I don't mean to say that it must go all the way with the old rituals, the old methods, the old way of training, etc. Because I mean, from one generation to another, as we grow older, as we get more intelligent, this is where our mindset comes in. We've got to, approach what it is of the needs and wants of our body. This is where the body comes in, and we can associate with what is necessary, and the staying power, the internal energy, is what we will call it, right, must also be linked. Okay. I must say that as I am getting a little bit older and having to see, perhaps not so much as forecast, the sort of stuff that is going on out there, where you've got, a lot of people out there, these guys as, martial artist that I am, I can open up a dojo, or I can do something, etc., etc. And this happens to be clearly put as something interfering with what it was, what it is, and how it must really take to light now into making it a correction, a period of correction. This is a new generation, and it has to begin with something that has to change what it is that's coming on. I mean to say, in the danger, why is it that we get so much stuck into the cyber tech, the likes of the takeover from all of these technologies being made available? People just simply downloading this and downloading that and putting it to use and claiming, that they're now experts, etc., and whatever.
Yes.
This is the danger. If it does come off with all that sort of disguised, mode of control, right? We're going to be zombies, or the next generation or the generations after will become zombies in this martial art, if there is the wording martial art, right? And so we take attention to that. Now, I also want to leave, them, both Johnny and Billy to like throw in a few questions or whatever, so that I can highlight what it is, in fact, to make clarity of.
You go, Billy.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hanshi, you really raised a really good question, and I think with the cyber, the technology, the pandemic that we've just gone through, and a lot of people have gone to the internet and do that, and that's one thing that I've said to my students. It's one thing learning from a book or from the internet and just looking at it visually. It's a whole different thing of having the master student, teacher student relationship in the dojo. What are your thoughts about that? And you just touched on it as well. And I think we're losing a lot of that, because you're right. People reference to a book, and following the pictures. The late Shihan Bobby Lowe had a book of the Goshin Jitsu techniques, and people are learning off the book, but it's nowhere near being in that dojo. People have got to realize that we need to keep, as a traditionalist, we need to keep the dojo alive. And this is what thoughts do you have on that?
I'd like to put it this way, Shihan. On this point in time, particularly related to even the legalities, and I'm talking now about what it is, even an industrial focus, right? Because it is something that we all must face up to, and that's occupational health and safety. Okay, that's number one. In doing so, we've got to adjust now to what it is of, the the mental side, right? The aptitude, right? And having that aptitude relating to not only training of our syllabuses, etc., but training exactly what we've had of past in the bringing up of students correctly in our feature of our training. Then comes what it is of the attitude. In the attitude, there's a lot of, misconceptions about how one teaches or how one trains or what it is from one system to another. This is where the science of teaching comes in. There's important features in what becomes from accreditation. We have not only physiology, biomechanics, first aid, etc., but communication, likes of even understanding what it is of the main factors and objectives of why is it that a student comes through the door as a lay person, right? Understanding that he's got to, try and do something for himself. The first thing comes on is fear management. So on communicating, when bringing on this release of fear management, how do we work it in with our training to bring about this encouraging, confident building, etc., so that that person can start pinpointing for himself how it is that he's becoming better and featuring what it is that he came for. The second thing is what we call phobia elimination. Everyone has some sort of a stigma, some sort of a thing in their head saying, oh, I can't do this, or I can't do it, I can't do, I can't. No, there's no such thing as I can't, right? And that's related to what it is that we can push aside. But this is where the teachers, or what it is in the teaching, has got to come on now more prolific, more pronounced, and sustaining for what people come to in training. And then, of course, lastly, our basics are so, like when people talk about martial art, they've got to consider how, the exercise, how we conduct ourselves in our martial arts training is not only so unique in many different ways, but very comprehensive to health and fitness. And this happens to be then where we're coming from into how we are placing our studies, our training exactly in all of these features that we provide out there. So basically what I'm saying and how we are putting it together, I don't know whether you've heard about this, which should be in fact important, that all black belts, all instructors, etc., should look into the wording coach check registration. It's free. Look onto the Google and you will see what it is that gives you some form of uniting what it is of all different disciplines as well, on different levels as well, to highlight where they are, how they've been involved, and where they're going to go. Because the one concern, and I'm sure you very well support me on this is the security. Insecurity right now, a lot of people are concerned about those unscrupulous practitioners out there, those that are handling even young kids who may be pedophiles, those who have got the kind of related issues, right, that have caused harm, whether it be assaults or getting into that sort of, trouble, etc. That doesn't represent what it is, martial art. Martial art is a specific item that helps people. We are considered like surrogate parents. We are considered like even, like counselors. We are considered like what it is to bring about the best that we can in providing a person health and fitness. That in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's
Great answer.
Item, isn't it?
So true, and that's what it is. We've got, we're everything. As people don't realise, as instructors, we're everything. I've just got a couple of little questions before then I'll hand it over to Johnny so he can grill you.
I'm not going to grill him.
No, it's an opportunity, Johnny. It's an opportunity. Hanshi, what got you into martial arts first? And then when was the first time you had interaction with Kyokushin?
Okay, this is how it began in Hawaii, and this is history. Yeah? I mean, it's hardly really spoken out about. I mean, from we local guys in Hawaii, and you guys got to know a lot of the local guys. You know, got to know the character of us local guys, etc. But in Hawaii, we've taken on something very descriptive of our nature, right? We can be happy-go-lucky, etc. But for invasion of the sort of, like people that come and, like put shit on us, if I might put it that way, and this happened to have been since the time of the war era, the post-war, Korean War, etc. A lot of servicemen coming across to Hawaii as they point of stop, going back to America and all that, and mainly, in the feature of their, I suppose R&R, mentality and whatever, right? But they had also, for many, experiences of that sort of bad, like experiences out in the war, etc. So they were a little bit heavy on the locals, etc. So we had to learn how to handle ourselves. Our population was not big, but we were integrated. We had the likes of our mixed cultures. And whether we were from one nationality to another, we were all like family. And that was, without doubt, how the integration of our martial arts, whether it be from the judo, jiu-jitsu, and kalis, arnis, etc., and what it was of, we had the lot, and bringing on totally what it was from the beginning, our days of really having to learn how to do what we had to do. Kempo was what it was that sort of highlighted a change, right, of the normal fisticuff and grappling and whatever. Then it became a little bit more sophisticated when the likes of jiu-jitsu and judo really brought about. And then of course when Kempo came into it, and this was from even the early 50s, the late 40s, etc., it became it began something that even myself as a high school kid, or like what, from age of 15, having to learn what it was different from boxing, because we could start to kick, we could start to really get into it like what it had to be. Okay, so that was about mid 50s that I got into it, right? When I came across from Kauai to Honolulu, I then had to transfer from Kempo, but it was there, uncanny like, that I'd met Manny De La Cruz just down the road, who became also one of the right-hand men of Babilo Shihan from, the beginning of the Kyokushin Kai days. Anyway, it just so happened that we trained, but Kyokushin Kai had gotten started. The other style, of course, had started from returning guys coming from Japan, Okinawa, etc. But it was in the late 50s that I'd gone to a party with some of our local friends from up there in Kalihi, and I got to know what this Goju was all about. Because this particular, my mentor and peer that really brought me into it, Anton Navas, he was a massive, real Kanaka soul, man. He was the head of what we call the Alis, the Hawaii, the chiefs of Hawaii. They were the motorcycle gang, right? They were like about 500 strong from the whole islands, right, together. And he was the head of it. But he was the right-hand man of Masago Shiro, our chief instructor of Goju Kai Hawaii, when Goju Kai got started. And I mean, uncanny, like, because the likes of Bobby Lowe, the likes of Ed Parker, the likes of Masago Shiro, the likes of James Miyagi, you name them guys, right, from Hawaii of the old days. They were all into Kempo together from the old days. It was something remarkable. And then so when I got into the likes of even having a touch of Kyokushin Kai, one of my very close friends, right, Peter Rodriguez, he says, I'm going to go and, try out this Kyokushin Kai, see what it's like. We weren't yet into Goju Kai, but he said, you want to come along. So, I'd gone along and, I got started and it was good. Then I thought, well, shit, this is something I should stick it out, but it was a little bit too far from where I had to travel. And then, of course, when I met up with Anton Navas and then Rodney Hu, etc., these guys here brought me into the Goju Kai training. And when I saw that Goju Kai was similar to Kyokushin, and then I never got to know until it was all told to us about how Shihan Babilo had gone to, Japan, and then Masao Shiro from Okinawa going to Japan. Well, they brought back what it had been of their development as well, but mixed with what, Babilo had brought on in Kyokushin and Oshiro with Goju Kai. Now, that got the start of where I, taking on something of a feature in my martial art. Because, I used to like to box because, I was brought up as a kid having to box as well. And, everybody did judo because just from walking distance from our school was the judo hall, and everybody went and did judo as well. But when it came to doing kempo and then karate, etc., it became more of a feature. But how interesting it was again in those days, right? We could get together. We never had the sort of competitions or fights between one dojo and another. But when there was, the scramble between the servicemen that would turn on, like what it is of a threat at the bowling alley or at the pub, etc. Wow, everybody would come out of the woodwork. And this is where it would happen. Real Hawaiian style. We say the big time for, we call it Duke City. I don't know if you heard of the word Duke City, but the word Duke City related to the big John Wayne, the big Duke, right? And so whenever, he was the bad bugger that always created, the kind of fisticuff, right? So they took it on as Duke City. You want to go Duke City, etc. This is how. Yeah.
How fascinating.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it answered it a lot, and it makes sense from one of the very first times that I went to Hawaii. The Hawaii connection. It was the Hawaii connection, and that was all the martial arts, and you named them all, the names, and the Kempo, the Goju, the Kyokushin, and the affiliation in Hawaii was called the Hawaii Connection. So it just makes sense. So thank you, Hanshi, very much for that, and it just really puts into perspective that comradeship and the brotherhood of martial arts. Yeah. Johnny,
John.
Oh, look, I've always asked Hanshi about Hawaii, and he's always filled me in with a lot of stories. But one thing that I did find, my first trip to Hawaii was 1987. 87 or 88? I think it was 87. Was a big group 87 or 88, Hanshi? I can't remember now.
88, the Piliana of Hawaii.
Yes, Piliana. So it was 88. It was 88. And the introduction I got there was just amazing how I met the Hawaiian connection. All these guys getting together. I've heard of Ed Parker and I've never seen him until 1988 there. And I'm like, wow. And I'm an Elvis freak, yeah? So seeing Ed Parker and asking him a couple of stories. And then Professor Wally J. Running into Professor Wally J. Another legend there that I've heard so many stories about. And he introduced Bruce, he had a close connection with Bruce Lee. So I guess what I want to ask is, Hanshi, I guess I always see that the Kyokushin and the Goju, everyone in Hawaii seems to be close. And one thing that I found was I was walking down the street one day and I had this fella look at me and he said, "Hey, bruh, you want some beef?" And I looked at him like, "Beef? No, mate, I'm good. I've eaten." And he just looked at me and just shook his head and walked away. Now I went back to Hanshi and said, "Hey, Hanshi, this guy asked me if I wanted beef." And I said, "I've eaten." And he goes, No, Johnny. He was asking if you want to mix it up. And that's what I found about the guys in Hawaii. they'll mix it up to see if you're good, but then they'll let you go. It's all good over there. It's just, it's a lot of love. And that's why I'm so drawn to Hawaii. And I guess, and seeing Goju and Kyokushin seem to have a very close connection in Hawaii, Hanshi. How did that start about?
Well, as I said, that all the instructors were once under Kempo.
Oh,
right?
all under Kempo.
Yeah,
Okay.
under James Mitose, who was like a Kempo instructor. And actually he was a man of the cloth. He was from the Baptist church, I think, whatever. But he started the group, and this was in the 40s, right? And this is where Bobby Lowe and all of them, right, in the later days of the 40s, even before the war, and then during the war years, that they were all together. But it just so happened that they grew out of it because of the situation as well. By the way, this Master James Mitose, he finished up, like passing away as a detained person doing lifetime in San Quentin in California. It's a big story. I can't really go into it because it's something. But anyway, the likes of the friendship of Hoshiro Sensei, and I mean, there's a book. I've got the history of all of those guys, right? And even the places of where they train and how they train, the Emperado system, creating, the Kaju Kempo and Marino Tawanak, and you name all of these guys, right? That had been all the local guys that even stuck together whilst they even had their own, different ways and training. But Kyokushin and Goju happens to have had that link. Why? It's because Sosai Oyama earlier in the piece as well trained with Gōgen Yamaguchi, and that's proof and history that Gōgen Yamaguchi and Sosai Oyama had been also very close through another instructor, Neiichi So, who was also the right-hand man of Gōgen Yamaguchi in Japan in the post-war days. Okay, so when it came to Sosai Oyama's visit onto going to America, etc., he always stopped over in Hawaii, right? And it wasn't until the first gathering of the All Hawaii Karate Championship, 1960, was when we saw hardly any difference, because the Jukumite of the Kyokushin and the Goju were the same, and we also mixed it with each other, enjoying that. It was very much the same. This is what, I can't get over it, that we were always, like good friends in every which way because of this. And even the katas, with the exception of the differences in movements, like how Sanshin is widely open and the big hand circle motions of Kensho, etc. But it was still very much the kata that came from, Chojin Miyagi, right? The actual changes in Japan, in fact, was brought about with Gōgen Yamaguchi having shorter hands and arms, etc., that made things different as well. So you see, in view of where we're coming from when we're saying about traditional, how many changes have it been from even China coming into Okinawa, and the likes of the northern Shurite, the central Tomarite, the south Nahate, etc., bringing together mixtures of kata that they even reinvented or done to highlight and even formulate what was best suited for them. That is why I say at this particular point in time, our role and it's necessary is to conduct ourselves, bringing on what it is in a correct way, the science of training. This is what I'd like to spend time off now, bringing masterclass seminar, masterclass integrated study enhancement for people to understand where they're coming from and how they can apply what they got. Because how many people would ever think the middle block, the middle parry block, whether we call it Chudanuke, Yokuke, etc., as just the very feature of what the actual movements in Wing Chun, where they use the radial muscle of the arm against, the man dummy. So when you do that on a deflect, it allows you also to actually turn your wrist to make it like as one motion in a parry. And that sort of thing is what we're conducting now in a master class. And even the likes of open hand techniques. When we're doing kamae, you notice the kamae of the Kyokushin, the kamae of the Goju is almost relatively the same. When I say relatively the same, we were at one time in that order of kamae, right? Not the way it became for competition, for using the, like forward thrust and reverse punch, so they had the lower and down. Not now. Not now. We have to bring on realism in our training as well. And this is why even the Chinese have come to revert into the actions of not only the Hungao, Hangungar, the Chuanfa, Pakwa, the Choi Li Fat, etc. And then what it is now, particularly in how we relate to something that is just simplified, just by these two words, reaction to action. When we talk about reaction to action, how many people would realize that when they are confronted, when they can feel something, right, as energy overpowering them, that they freeze or they stand even so much as just anchored. But if they take their body slightly back in an angular, it takes a different balance that makes it very evident for what they're expecting. That's what it is that we are working on. So all of that comes from kata. And kata from one style to another is okay. But we got dissect kata. This is where we differ now from what bunkai is to what jitsu. Bunkai means the way the Okinawans have professed this to be, right? Definitions of each movement. Why is it that we turn our hands down, right, like as in kururumfa, and we don't use it in our exercise for basic? We only use kake. Why do we use only kake when kake, the reverse hand inverted, is of the same movement, etc., etc.? You see, this is where I'm coming from. Interesting?
Yeah,
Very.
very, very.
That is why we now have got to look upon this as a new era.
Awesome.
The era for the masters learning. We can never stop. There's no ceiling for our stopping. We must now take aside what we are teaching the lower grades, teaching them all that would bring them up to a Shodan whole level, Shodan whatever. But from the Shodan level on up, it's a learning capacity now, bringing on just the science. And that will make us not only more convenient, more complete in our study, but much more effective from within ourselves, how we can relate.
Jeez. Let's give Hanshi a bit of a break to get a bit of water there, but very, very interesting. Thank you for your in-depth. For us, for me, it's going to another level. That's amazing. Good questions, Shihan's. I have one, Hanshi, and please have a break if you need to have a tea or a water. But the angle that you have mentioned in the history side was what we had just brought up for the listeners. It was an angle that we had to appreciate from Hanshi immensely, that, in the hour that we have, and we're 40 minutes in, this is how detailed it can get to, and the chats that I've had, Hanshi, with many other Shihans, it's just a drop of a hat and it's over. So we appreciate it thus far. My angle for you is, when the call for you to come to Melbourne, Australia via your Shihan as such, how did you gesture it? You raised a beautiful family here, you were married here, the influence of you being here into Australia in the mid-60s, obviously was, you know, were you excited? Were you, you know, overwhelmed? What was it?
Okay, I'll put it this way. I, for myself, am amazed at how I've come over the years into creating or into involving myself with what time I have. I know that at best, even Johnny can tell you this, I'd sleep 4 hours a night, and that's 24/7, right? Over the 24/7. I'd sleep 4 hours a night, but every moment of what I would be in rest, I'd turn off. I'd be able to recover, you know, like readjust myself, recharge my batteries, etc. But it was always something that happened to have been, you know, like from within me. Um, I suppose I would put it as an indoctrination. And why it was, I came from, you know, an immigrant parents, all right, living not in poverty. Well, it did get into the impoverished lifestyle when mom abandoned us as well. But the lifestyle of what my father put into me was to always look ahead and get ahead of yourself. You know, when I came onto the word that had been written up once and even explained as failure shouldn't be in a vocabulary. You know, failure shouldn't be in a vocabulary, right? It should be, you know, like um, an attempt, right? You know, like an attempt that wasn't necessarily accomplished or whatever.
Mm.
Because when it comes to failure, it's a negativity that drops you complete, right? So it was also when my first mentor instructor, that man Anton Navas, says, always remember this, always. To fall 7 times is to rise 8. Life begins now. So all in that compilation of these times of how I put things together drove me on. I got kicked out of high school, from Kauai High School. Reason why? I had a good fisticuff in a bloody big yard. And then also another one was with my English teacher. You know, in English class, he was our basketball coach. He was an American, tall, 6'4", 6'5", Yank, right? Mr. And Mr. Bales, his name was. And English class, he's supposed to be reading. I was supposed to be behind his book. I fell asleep, and he walked in the back of me and slapped my head. And we carried knives, right? In those days, I mean, you saw the movies of those days where the switchblade was just very, very much an item. And I came out whack with the switchblade, and I swore, and he took off. He took off, ran to the bloody headmaster's office. Oh man, all hell turned loose. They called up my father, or my father couldn't come because he was out in the fields working. But they called on to our very close friend. He was a pastor of a Methodist church, and they came to the school, and I got expelled for 2 weeks then. But again, another thing that happened then was I was over in the boys' toilet, and I was having a fag, and I got caught by one of the teachers. You know, the teacher wanted to call me over to the office, and I was gonna beef the bug. I mean, it didn't worry me. Anyway, that was what I was. It was a little bit of a difference of character. But I left after that to go on to the island of Honolulu, our capital island, and that's where it all started, because I had wanted to get back to school to get onto my high school diploma as well. But you know, at 15 years old, and I was having to, you know, live as I did then in a 10-foot by 10-foot room that I rented. I went and worked in a pineapple factory as well to earn my keep. Then, you know, my uncle, you know, my mother's brother, you know, asked me to come and live with him, and that's when it started to happen, changing my life. And then I joined the Marines at 17. I made up time to get back to my education, getting back my high school diploma, etc., and then working my way up to whatever I did. But again, on question is what you put, what drove me into looking beyond the blue sea out there and having to say, coming from a sugar cane, plantation, not having, the literal, like, of course, I never failed in my classes. I always graduated, etc., but not from high school, of course. High school on the bloody roads, etc. Yeah, but when I joined the Marines, it was a different thing. It was a different thing. It just seemed to open up where I had to see, or there was that possibility. I even, became a corporal. I went to, became somebody that was able to travel. I was involved with music as well. So I was one of the buglers from the famous FMF pack drum and bugle team. We were a special unit that got based in Hawaii as special security as well for what it was for. Anyway, it's all highly classified work that we did, but this is what brought me to Australia.
Wow.
And this is when it happened back in 62, again in 63. And so it was all the time that I was involved with martial art as well, that was not only improving on my mindset, but giving me that sort of direction of what I had often said, I heard from my father, look ahead of you, right? Do something. Because my father was much the same. He saw his father being killed by the Spanish, verdugo out in the village, right? For the kind of extortion, etc., that they were on the local farmers, etc. Then he grew up with a stepfather that wasn't good to him, and he left and got into boxing, etc., in Manila before he joined up to come to Hawaii on a contract.
Wow.
These are the kind of stories that would be in my book, but again, I share it as a martial art with a bit of a focus. And I say with a bit of a focus because I like to make certain that everyone is online with what it is of closing the gap. We come on into realizing, right? We come on into realizing that we have something now that we are reaching for the future. We can't perhaps visualize the future. And this gap happens to be there. If we use the gap in the actual acronyms of the GAP, it'll get you there. The G for setting goals. The A for aiming in the direction of which you are objectively putting those goals into action. And P with purpose. You close the gap. How's that?
Very nice. Very cool indeed. There we have it. So Shihan, Billy, we've got about 10 or so minutes. If either one of you want to rehash a couple of the memories of Hawaii, and again, feel free to now. Let's rehash some of your fun times.
About a brotherhood story, and this was the when just going back to Hanshi Tino saying about the brotherhood, and we sort of stick together, especially with the Hawaiians. Shihan, Johnny and I, we were 1990 fighting in the All Hawaii and American tournament, Big Open division. So it was back then I was a little bit slender and in the 181 pound and over class, and we were full contact. But Shihan Bobby Lowe would invite the American guys, some Sabaki guys. It was all open. It was a fantastic tournament. We had this one guy when Sabaki was new. He was knocking out blokes. He was American fighter. He was just knocking them out, putting his finger up. Johnny was coming up from one end, and Johnny was smashing all his blokes. I'm smashing that way. We get to the semi-finals, and guess who my opposition was? Shihan Johnny, right? We were both senpais then. But the Hawaii connection came together. Hanshi Tino, Shihan Bobby Lowe, and Hanshi Eddie Emin, they came together. They discussed the plan. Johnny Johnny, we said, right, we're not going to fight the semis. So we didn't fight each other. Johnny fought the guy for third place and absolutely destroyed him. And then I ended up fighting the number one guy, and I destroyed him in about 17 seconds. And
what?
Yeah,
wasn't
Johnny.
He was the Chicago Copper, wasn't he? Was he?
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
Yeah.
from the Sabaki, number one. He
was very arrogant, very arrogant.
Yeah, very arrogant. I remember that one. Yeah.
He had won the Sabaki Challenge, the big one in America, right?
I didn't know that. There you go.
And they had the big challenge. And Stewie Corrigal was the center referee. And I smashed him in the inside and outside thigh kicks.
Yeah,
and it was all over. It was 17 seconds. And then I remember the photo we've taken. That's a magnificent photo that the four of us there with Hanshi, Shihan, Eddie, myself, Johnny with our trophies and that. And Hanshi Tino said, the Hawaii connection's still alive. We're working well.
That was a good tournament, that one. We were there 2 weeks before that. And I remember I competed a tournament every weekend, that one, if you remember, Hanshi. And just before we competed in that Kyokushin tournament, we were invited by Shihan Bobby Lowe to go down and train at his dojo. And he put on a massive feast for us also. And that's what I loved about Hawaiians. No matter where you got invited to a dojo, you just had to go with an empty stomach. Yeah. Because after training, if you didn't drink, too bad, you're going to drink. And we call them slabs. They call them suitcases over there. So they would have a couple of suitcases over there, not one, mind you. And then I have all the meat. And it was. And I remember when I went for the weigh-in, I was supposed to be middleweight. I think I ate too much. I actually that's how I went into your class, Billy. I fell into your class because I fell over a couple of kilos on top instead of under. And but it was great times. Loved every minute of it.
Great memories in Hawaii, and all the times there. But actually, I've got a question for Shihan, Johnny. Johnny, when did you first decide to do Goju and walk into this great legend, this great man's dojo as
Goju. Well, Goju just, unfortunately, fortunately, just ran in my family. My cousin Nick, my cousin John, and my cousin Peter used to do, Nick did Gōju Kai with Sensei Wilson in the city. And my other two cousins is Goju Ryo in Caulfield. And I remember I walked into Sensei Graham Wilson's dojo in the city, and I saw this awesome kumite fight between who at the time I didn't know who it was, and it was Sensei Graham Wilson having a kumite fight with a green belt, and that gi in the end, the whole front of it just had a red stripe running right through, and his nose just wouldn't stop, and with the respect that he was giving back to his instructor, that just drawed me into, I've got to join. I've got to do this. But unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to. I was too young. I was only 13 years old at the time. So that's what drew me to Goju. I guess more than anything was, it was my cousins that drew me to Goju and seeing what I saw. And what drew me to Kyokushin was one of the Goju instructors, Sensei Noel Griffiths. He's the one that told me when I was a green belt. You'll remember him, Billy. He said, what are you doing? He goes, you should be competing in some Kyokushin tournaments. Go and train some Kyokushin. And I went, Kyokushin? What's Kyokushin? I didn't know what Kyokushin was. And then as later on down the track, I knew what it was all about, did some research. And then I met Billy, and then I was invited to Shihan Eddie's dojo, which was at Elwood Dojo, beautiful dojo, very nice dojo. And and history's on from there,
Wow. Yeah, no, it's a lot of history there, and the relationship between Hanshi Eddie and Hanshi Ceberano is just incredible, and the comradeship, and that's it's up to Johnny, Sensei Pat, myself, and us to continue that relationship in the future too, and hopefully we can do the great work that Hanshi Ceberano has done, and of late you've been also formally recognised with your OAM, so congratulations, sir, on that.
Yes.
Well done on that. But that's it for me. Paddy, have you We can sit here for hours.
Yeah, I know.
I'm starting to get into it right now.
Yeah.
Honestly, guys.
Well,
Sorry,
let me try my best, and to be brutally honest to all the listeners, you all got to put yourself in my position here with a 9th Dan, 6th Dan, 5th Dan's all over. You know, it's so much experience, so much knowledge. So I'll do my best here to summarize the next 5 to 10 minutes, if that's all right, while we've got Hanshi's time. Hanshi, again, thank you so much for your time. You know, you've given us so much. And last year at Shihan Billy's camp, you know, we were just so blessed to have you both there, and Shihan Johnny, and get that, you know, that the speech and the knowledge of what you are working towards now, and putting so much time and effort into. Hanshi, you know, when you see these two Shihans now, these two, you know, lads as such, as you would call them because of your respect, but you've seen them come through, the likes of Hanshi and yourself. You know, when you were teaching these types of young men at that time, and no disrespect, Shihans, I'm not saying you're not young still.
hey, look, it's all here.
Give me something.
Look at you. Oh,
when you saw these men and so many people that you've influenced, Hanshi, and I just finished interviewing Richard Norton, who passes on his regards to you as well. You know, how did you feel, or what were you so encouraged by, especially, you know, the two that we have here, because, you know, you guys yourself and Hanshi would have seen the future as such, and would have wanted these types of people to continue the, you know, as I say, keep the flame alive.
It is with pride. I mean to say it has to be even beyond that, which brings about something of a very clear cut reason why it is that, you know, I've given my best to see that people become as good as myself, if not better. That has been a cause, and that has been a mission, and that I see very well in what they're doing as well, in how they're conducting themselves, how they've brought on others as well to follow in that line. We've started this. It must be continued on. It's like a flame burning in lighting a torch that leads the way. And I see this as what it had been for myself. I mean, in the earlier days, I've seen, you know, what it had been through. Many hours, many people that I've been involved with, and I've trained, and I've fought, etc. But it has been a lifestyle that has been of choice. You know, there's something that I'm sure goes on with a recital that really brings on, you know, the very wording that I really wanting to put forward to people, right? And I'll do it sometime because it's quite a long recital. And I feel now, particularly with, again, the pride and the honor of how, you know, like I have seen these two guys just grow up from the youth and have been involved, have evolved as well. And I know very well that we are on track. And being on track is subject to how we retain, maintain, and contain. That spirit of how it is was told to me by Gōgen Hanshi in view of these words. The ku, meaning free, shin is of the spirit, and do is the way. So it becomes the free spirit way in creating what it is of our objectives in life. Go with the flow.
Unbelievable. How good is that? Thank you so much. Here we go. I don't know how to end it, but there you have it, listeners. I said we would do our best with the Kyokushin Shuffle. I'll give it a gesture here. Shihan Bill, you've got the floor for a minute. Shihan John, you got the floor for a minute, and then we'll thank Hanshi Tino.
Sensei Pat, you know, really honoured with what you are doing here and the work you're doing, just to capture these moments and and we need to put it out. Shihan, Johnny, I've known you for a very long time, and mate, you inspire me just as anyone else with your path in Goju, which is very familiar with my path here. And, you know, and to be in the presence of these people, especially Hanshi, you know, Ceberano there, and even though it's a different style, the respect is always there. It's, you know, the one thing that I did learn from Eddie and Shihan Bob below, my two Shihans, was it's not the art, but it's the person that makes the art. And always focus on the person, regardless of what art we do. So I thank you both for your time. I thank you to Sensei Pat for this opportunity to be a part of this elite group that we can take this forward in the future.
Shihan, John?
Sensei Pat, I'm honoured actually. I'm honoured to be on this. This is my first podcast, I'd say, and look, I'm honoured to be on it. Billy, we've known each other for a very long time, and yes, and likewise, mate. Likewise, coming down to your camp. As much as I can't wait to have you guys at our camps. Yep, I love the relationship that I have got with a lot of people, but with the relationship I've got with Kyokushin. In regards, Billy, it started with you and me, and then it moved. I got to meet people in the Kyokushin. It's just been very close, and yeah. It's a great journey, very great journey.
Awesome. Hanshi, if you've got any final words.
Yes. May the force of positive energy go with you all.
Unreal.
Right? More power to you.
Awesome.
Go with the flow.
Everyone, Merry Christmas to you all, to all three of you.
Merry Christmas.
And a big Merry Christmas to everyone around the world. Thank you so much to everyone for listening to the Kyokushin Shuffle. I'm absolutely blessed and honored to have an hour with you three gentlemen. Hanshi, Tino, thank you so much for your time, and all the best to everyone, and have a great Christmas and a happy new year to you all. A big wish from myself, Shihan Bill, Shihan, Johnny Ross, and Hanshi Tino Ceberano. Us, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, you gotta take care. Melikalikimaka.
Melikalikimaka.
Hang on.